The next thing I'd like to talk about is polypaint. It doesn't relate to modeling directly, but there are a few reasons why I think it's a good thing to mention within this modeling video. I find it helpful to paint your model at the sculpting stage, even if you don't plan on using what you paint for your final textures. This is particularly useful for character models because giving your faces even a rudimentary pass on colors can help you see your model a little closer to how it might appear in the final, and this can quickly help you spot areas that need modeling adjustments. I do bake out my polypaint into a texture sometimes, but that's something we'll go over a little bit later. I don't polypaint everything, however. In a lot of situations, I only paint the skin areas, kind of like how I did with this model. You can see here. I also have it on the body as well, but it's hidden right now. And the reason I do this is because the body and the face is typically the most important and tricky form to get right, and everything else is, at least for me, it's not too difficult. And I'd rather just go ahead and finish or start the textures within Photoshop or another application. But for this demo, I'll do a quick pass on this as well. But I'll start over with a new painting for the skin. So let's say that you have your model complete, and or what you think is complete, and looking kind of the way you want. The first thing you need to do for polypaint is to enable these brushes, and I already have some polypaint on here. But when you do that, the next it won't. What it'll do is it'll stop looking at whatever material that you have going on here, and it'll let you fill a specific material in there. That this way you can get different materials and different subtools. In this case, what I'll do is I'll assign it one of a custom material that I made, which is really just a variation of the Skin Shade 04 material that comes with ZBrush. I think the only things I did to it, let me take a look here. I increased the diffuse to be 100, and I think I played with the specular and the reflectivity. Maybe I don't remember exactly what I did, but that's just so that the colors show up more truly when looking at it in the viewport, and also because at least for skin, I don't want to see a great deal of specularity, and certainly I don't want to see any reflectivity. So what I'll go ahead and do is, with that selected, I'll change this to be MRGB. My interface is a little bit different from default, but you should have this button, MRGB. And then when you go to color, fill object, and what it'll do is it'll fill this object with material and the color that's selected, which is at the moment is white. You could also just fill it with the material, and then it wouldn't use this color. And what I'll do now is I'll go ahead and change the color to something roughly skin color. It doesn't really matter if it's correct or not to begin with. I like to start with something kind of neutral, not too dark, not too light, and just fill object again. And this time it only filled the color instead of the material, although in this case it doesn't matter because I have the same material selected here. And with this selected, you notice I have the standard brush on, but I turned off Z add or Z sub so that when I brush, it'll only do the RGB because that's what's selected here. So far as to change the color, I could start painting away. But one of the great failings of PolyPaint is that it doesn't really work like the way painting does in Photoshop. There aren't really layers that you can use. They do have some blending modes. If you go to brush and down in the down in alpha and texture, very intuitively placed, there's a PolyPaint mode slider. If you mouse over it, you can see 1 is standard, 2 colorize, 3 multiply, 4 lighten, and 5 darken. These don't quite work, at least in my experience. It doesn't really work the way I really expect them to, compared to the Photoshop equivalents. Usually I just don't even bother with this. But if you get into a situation where you want to maybe lighten or darken your whole painting, this might be a good thing to look at. But for me, I'm just going to leave it on 1 for now. And I'll just color pick. And in ZBrush, color picking is mousing over a different area and pressing C. So you mouse over the eye, press C, and you see the color change to blue. And again, as always, I recommend you have some kind of reference to go by, which I have on my other monitor here. To begin with, I'm not really concerned about getting things perfect. I'm just blocking things out quickly, and just to get a feel for how things are going, and then I'll change things as I go along.
We're jumping to a time lapse here. You see, I have things darker on the outsides and a little bit lighter in the center of the face, and mostly that's just to keep the attention on the face itself. I'm not worried about being super precise about my painting, but there are some parts, such as the edges of the eyes, that I do want to keep pretty clean. And you can see the color of the eyes right now is jumping around depending on what color I've selected, and that's just because I haven't enabled PolyPaint on the eyeballs yet. And I am painting what I would consider to be more like highlights right now. And this isn't exactly the way I would approach it if I was to make a diffuse map for the low poly model, but I just find that on the poly painting stage, it's helpful to paint in a little bit of lighting and maybe a little bit of shadow too, just to kind of help sell it to yourself visually. Just trying to find the right color for certain areas. Here, just kind of adding some saturation where in the corners where the skin would kind of reflect upon itself, and the light would scatter underneath the surface. And a lot of this lighting, it's just to help define the forms, maybe exaggerate it a little bit. Again, the theory for me being that if I exaggerate things a little bit, maybe it'll help me see problems. I'm not going to actually adjust the model itself right here. I mean, even though in retrospect, looking back on this, there are some areas that I would have liked to have tweaked, but I'm just going to be showing the poly painting. And you see I start with some dark colors first, such as on the inside of the eye and the lips. It just kind of helps me to jump to one extreme, just to better judge the colors that I'm putting down and the values. And here you can see I'm experimenting with some different color variation on the face, and it's not just random. There's some theory behind what colors are more dominant, in depending on what part of the face you're at. For both male and female, there's things tend to be cooler around the jawline, and perhaps more yellow on the forehead, more blush on the cheeks, things like that. And here I'm gonna paint some new eyes. What I like to do first is to get a value that's kind of light but not too much different from the skin value that you've chosen. I mean, unless you have a really dark skin, then you wouldn't want your eyeballs to be really dark too. But you don't want like bright whites in the sclera. Here, just painting in the iris, and you notice that it's not a super defined edge around the iris, and that's another thing that can help make your iris look more natural. It's just give it a little bit of a fuzzy edge, fuzzy but still defined enough. And you can see that the painting is super crude. I'm not interested in a pixel perfect eyeball right now. It's just something to block out. And on the eye itself, I was using the variation of the toy plastic matte cap. And you can see here I'm highlighting the edges of the eye. The inside and outside corners of the eye. It's just one of those things that apparently is done a lot in makeup application to accentuate the eye. And I do highly recommend taking a look at some YouTube videos on makeup application. I mean, there's no shortage of pretty women teaching each other how to be more pretty online. So, and there's a lot of valuable information there. Highly recommend checking it out. Especially if you're a guy and you have, no experience with that kind of stuff. You're just blocking out some eyebrows. I'm not going to be really final with this. It's just something to see right now. And having eyebrows is always a nice thing. Here I'm adding a little bit of warmth to the eyebrows, just to help it sit into the face a little bit better. You don't want it to look too drawn on, and having saturation there can really suggest the meeting point between the hair and the skin. you really want to be careful with the shape of the eyebrows. There's a lot of personality, and that can be communicated with that. Even darkening the inside edges of the eyelids, just to where the mascara would be. It's one of those things. I really did not know that women painted actually on there for that kind of effect. And here I'm just painting some highlights onto the lips. I mean, it's not a super realistic thing to do, and I probably wouldn't have that on the final diffuse for the low poly model. I'd probably take care of that through the specular. But again, for now, just to sell it to myself. Here we start painting the hair. And again, even on the low poly model's textures on the diffuse, I'm not afraid of painting stuff, painting certain effects, even if it's like little highlights and shadows, things that you are taught not to do on a map, on a model that's normal map. And that's just because, if you can't get an effect done through the shaders, then you might as well paint it on there. At least that's always been my philosophy. I don't care if it's not physically accurate. The final result is what matters more to me. And if I have to paint it, then I'll do it. Here I'm just painting a little bit of shadow just to help settle the face in there with the hair, and darken the ears. I thought they were attracting a little bit too much attention. Adding a bit more contrast to the corner of the lips. And it's just about done. Darkening the corners of the eyes. In the next video, we'll go over modeling for games. This will involve retopology, laying out the UVs, and the baking of the texture maps. I think all of these things are often considered kind of the boring parts of character art, but it's really essential and will directly impact how good your model can be in the end.